A new front has opened in the global economic conflict, signaling a dramatic escalation in tensions between some of the world's largest economies. The stakes have never been higher, as nations grapple with shifting alliances and the growing uncertainty of international trade. The Trump administration is once again wielding tariffs as its weapon of choice, doubling down on its America First agenda and seeking to rewrite the rules of global commerce. This time, the targets are America's closest allies, the European Union and Canada. With an August 1st deadline looming for new trade deals, the pressure is mounting on all sides to reach an agreement before the clock runs out. If no deals are reached, sweeping new tariffs will hit, threatening to reshape international commerce and disrupt supply chains that have been built over decades. The EU and Canada are not backing down. They've prepared a massive $150 billion counterstrike, signaling their determination to defend their economies and stand up to US pressure. Both sides are targeting politically sensitive industries, aiming to inflict maximum pain and pressure on their rivals. From steel and automobiles to agriculture and timber, no sector is off limits in this escalating trade war. Proposed US tariffs could reach 30% on European goods, including cars, wine, and luxury products, items that are central to Europe's export economy and cultural identity, and 35% on Canadian products, economic bombshells by any measure. Canadian industries like lumber, maple syrup, and beef now face an uncertain future as they brace for impact. Europe and Canada are retaliating with tariffs on iconic American goods, from motorcycles and bourbon to agricultural exports, hoping to turn US businesses and workers into a force for de-escalation and political pressure at home. The world is watching as this high-stakes standoff threatens to upend decades of trade norms, with the potential to reshape the global economic landscape for years to come. To understand this conflict, we need to understand tariffs, one of the oldest tools in international trade. Tariffs have shaped the way countries interact for centuries, influencing everything from the price of everyday goods to the fate of entire industries. A tariff is essentially a tax on imported goods, designed to make foreign products more expensive and protect domestic industries from overseas competition. When you see a higher price tag on imported items, that's often the result of a tariff at work. Governments use tariffs to encourage people to buy locally made products, hoping to boost homegrown businesses and jobs. The Trump administration revived tariffs as a core part of its America First policy, aiming to rebalance what it sees as unfair trade relationships with other countries. This marked a major shift in US trade strategy, putting tariffs back in the headlines and at the center of global economic debates. By threatening steep tariffs, the White House hopes to force the European Union and Canada to the negotiating table, using economic pressure as leverage to secure better deals for American workers and industries. But tariffs are a double-edged sword. They raise costs for consumers and businesses that rely on imported parts and materials. Everyday shoppers may find themselves paying more, while manufacturers face higher expenses that can squeeze profits and threaten jobs. History warns us, like the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, which deepened the Great Depression, retaliatory cycles can devastate economies. When countries respond to tariffs with their own, it can trigger a downward spiral that hurts everyone involved. Today's trade battle echoes those past mistakes, risking a spiral of retaliation that could slow the global economy, disrupt supply chains, and unsettle financial markets worldwide. The winners and losers of tariffs are never clear-cut. The fallout spreads across industries and borders, affecting not just big corporations but also small businesses, workers, and families everywhere. The stakes are high and the risks are real for workers and businesses on all sides. As the world watches, the outcome of this tariff standoff could shape the future of global trade for years to come. The European Union isn't sitting idle in the face of mounting US trade threats. Instead, it's mobilizing its resources and political will, determined to defend its economic interests on the global stage. In Brussels, leaders have crafted a carefully phased retaliation plan, designed to escalate step by step if the US follows through on its aggressive measures. This isn't just a reaction, it's a calculated strategy, built on months of analysis and negotiation. The first phase targets $24.5 billion worth of American goods, zeroing in on products tied to influential US political interests, like bourbon, wheat, and SUVs. These choices are no accident. They're meant to send a message straight to Washington's power centers. Should the US escalate further, the EU is prepared to respond with an additional $84 billion in tariffs, striking at the heart of core American industries, such as heavy machinery, advanced technology, and manufacturing. And if tensions continue to rise, a third phase could push the total to a staggering $135 billion, dealing a direct blow to the backbone of U.S. exports and global supply chains. By announcing its plan in stages, the EU is sending a clear signal. It's ready for a prolonged standoff, but it's also leaving the door open for dialogue and negotiation, hoping to avoid a full-blown trade war. This is economic brinkmanship at its finest, a high-stakes chess match where each side dares the other to make the next move, knowing the consequences could ripple across the world economy. The EU's strategy is to maximize its leverage while minimizing its own pain, carefully choosing targets that will hurt the US but spare European industries as much as possible. The message is unmistakable. For every move the US makes, Europe stands ready to answer with an even bigger one, determined to protect its interests and assert its power on the world stage. Canada, too, is ready to hit back with a two-stage plan. First, $15.6 billion in tariffs on US steel and aluminum, a direct response to American threats. If the conflict escalates, Canada will target nearly $40 billion in US goods, including auto parts and appliances, disrupting deeply integrated supply chains. Combined with the EU's measures, the total retaliation nears $150 billion. Canada's approach is both economically painful and politically strategic, aiming to rally US opposition to the tariffs. The message is clear: any US protectionism will be met with equal force. The EU and Canada have chosen their targets carefully, aiming at the most vulnerable and politically sensitive sectors of the US economy. Aerospace is in the crosshairs. A 35% EU tariff on Boeing could cost $110 billion in orders, shifting business to Airbus. Honeywell faces similar threats, risking billions in lost R&D and jobs. The US auto industry, especially electric vehicles, could see its European market share collapse, devastating Michigan and Ohio. Canada's tariffs on auto parts threaten to halt assembly lines on both sides of the border. Agriculture and spirits are also targeted. Wisconsin corn, Kansas wheat, and Kentucky bourbon could be priced out of key markets. These products aren't just economic, they're cultural icons and political pressure points. The pain of this trade war will be felt far beyond Washington, reaching deep into American communities. Behind the numbers, the human cost is real. Factory workers in Seattle and Detroit face layoffs as orders dry up and production slows. Farmers in Kansas and distillers in Kentucky risk losing markets they've spent years building. The integrated US-Canada auto industry means job losses on both sides of the border. For many families, this isn't just about trade policy, it's about mortgages, futures, and communities at risk. The trade war's impact is personal, immediate, and deeply disruptive. Canada's trigger tax is a clever weapon in this fight. It sets a quota for US steel and aluminum imports, stay under the limit and trade continues, go over, and a 50% tariff hits. This protects Canadian producers from a flood of cheap US metal, while ensuring manufacturers still get what they need. Retroactive inspections prevent companies from gaming the system. The trigger tax is targeted, flexible, and tough to evade. It's a sophisticated tool in Canada's arsenal designed to inflict pain without self-harm. The trade war is redrawing the map of global commerce. Companies are rerouting supply chains to avoid tariffs, bypassing the US entirely. Canadian aluminum is heading to Europe, Brazilian steel to Canada, and Asian tech firms are skipping US assembly lines. The US, once a central hub, risks being sidelined as businesses seek stability elsewhere. Building new trade routes is costly, but the uncertainty of US policy makes it necessary. The result? A more fragmented global economy, with new trading blocs and less US influence. This is not a temporary shift, it's a structural change. The world is moving on, with or without America at the center. Trade and climate policy are colliding in this conflict. The EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism will soon tax imports based on their carbon footprint, adding costs for US goods on top of tariffs. Canada's hydro-powered aluminum is now a premium, green product favored by European buyers. As climate rules tighten, US exports face double penalties, political and environmental. Canadian banks are backing green projects, giving their industries a long-term edge. Without a US carbon policy, American goods risk being shut out of key markets. The new trade war is as much about emissions as economics. In the past, the World Trade Organization would have stepped in to mediate, but the WTO's dispute system is paralyzed. Thanks to US blockades, it can't enforce rules or resolve conflicts. With no referee, countries are settling disputes through raw economic power, not international law. This power vacuum makes trade wars more likely and harder to stop. Businesses face a volatile, unpredictable environment. Without the WTO, backing down becomes a political risk, not just a legal one. The era of rules-based trade is giving way to a new age of economic brinkmanship. The pain from tariffs is fueling a political backlash in the US. Industry lobbies, aviation, automotive, agriculture, and spirits are pressuring Congress to de-escalate. These groups represent millions of jobs and powerful voting blocs. The administration faces a choice: stick to its protectionist guns or heed the growing outcry from American businesses and workers. The outcome may hinge on which side shouts loudest in Washington. The next few weeks will decide if the US doubles down or seeks a way out. As the August deadline looms, the world waits. A last-minute deal could avert disaster, but trust between trading partners is already damaged. If talks fail, a full-blown trade war will erupt, raising prices, killing jobs, and fragmenting the global economy. Even with a resolution, the old era of seamless globalization is over. Trade policy is now tied to climate action and raw power, not just economics. The WTO's paralysis means future disputes will be settled by confrontation, not consensus. The rules of global trade are being rewritten, and the outcome will shape the world for years to come. Subscribe to channel Skytech-Lens for more updates.